We demystify what goes on behind the therapy room door. Join us on this voyage of discovery and co-creative conversations. This is the Therapy Show, Behind Closed Doors podcast, with Bob Cooke and Jacci Jones.
Welcome back to the next episode of the Therapy Show Behind Closed Doors with myself, Jacci Jones, and the wonderful Mr. Bob. And what we're going to be talking about in this episode is shame, the forgotten emotion in the therapy room. I'm really looking forward to this one, Bob.
Well, it's a very interesting topic. I wrote an article with that title something like 15 years ago.
Wow.
And you can get it on Google. If you put Shame the Forgotten, it'll appear in Google. So
I'm going to do that after.
It's also on my website, bobcooke.org. It's also on my MCPT Institute website and various other places. So that was 15 years ago. And I believe it's as relevant today as 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Shame appears not only in the therapy process, which we're talking about, but in the supervision process.
Absolutely.
And the training process.
Yeah.
And if we go back to your days, and I was thinking about it today, and somebody asked me, because I'd watched the podcast on something or other, erotic transference years ago. And I said, how many years ago since Jacci trained at the Institute? And I said, I have no idea, but I will ask her tonight.
2012.
So that's 14 or 15 years ago, isn't it?
Well, I started in 2012 and I finished in 2016. So it's like coming up to 10 years since I qualified, but I signed up in 2012. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's still as relevant today. I mean, if you go back to your time in the training group, was shame talked about how much, do you think?
Yeah.
I can't remember. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It is one of those things that we don't often talk about generally. We feel it, we experience it, but we don't often talk about it. Whereas other emotions like, sadness or anxiety or fear or whatever, we're quite open talking about those. But shame is one that I think we don't really open up about.
No, that's true. Clients often talk about being humiliated, defined. And when I mention shame, were they shamed? Then almost 100% will say yes.
Yeah.
So even they don't say the word, if I initiate that and said, do you mean shame here, that you felt shamed, etc., etc., then we get a very, a response, which is yes, basically. So many clients have a shame-based presentation. In other words, they present with shame in their history.
Because am I right in thinking that there's something about shame, that it's about the self, it's about us?
Do you want to say a little bit more? It is about us, you're correct.
Well, rather than a behaviour that I did something wrong or, I made a mistake or whatever it is, shame is more about I'm bad or I'm wrong. It's more, I don't know, it seems to be more deep-rooted and more about us as a person.
Well, way, way, way in another lifetime or 5 lifetimes ago, I used to train polo ponies.
Wow.
And I remember learning how to knot the tails.
Yes.
And you go crisscross, 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 crisscross. And shame is a bit like that. It's very insidious, very interwoven into our very fabric of humanity.
Yeah.
So shame is very, when people talk about it, very woven into who we are. And just right, you're correct. The people who come with a shame-based presentation will talk about themselves being wrong or something like that. Their actions come from that premise.
Yeah.
And it's turned into a decision usually if they feel shamed, humiliated. There's something's wrong with them. Now, they may then act out in behaviors that are associated with shame, but you're correct. It's usually they make it into almost like an existential decision about themselves and their identity.
Yeah, I can remember probably the first time I actually felt shame was probably in primary school. Do you know what I mean? Getting something wrong, putting your hand up in class and getting something wrong and really feeling awful. The embarrassment and the shame and everything from getting it wrong in front of the whole class.
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
And I don't think there'll be anybody on the planet that doesn't know or haven't felt or hasn't felt shamed in some way.
Yeah.
The education system in the United Kingdom is often based on shame, by the way.
Yeah.
It's based on a whole process, I believe, and I'm okay, you're not okay. What you've just explained there, of a very young child, is very, very common.
Yeah.
And
It
it gets
stays with you. You do make like you say, you make a certain decision about yourself in that moment that stays with you. Yeah.
and it's carried on often into the psychotherapy training. People come from a whole teaching in the United Kingdom, which is a one up, one down, often shaming process, or could be, or can be,
Yeah.
and then is carried on into the psychotherapy training process. And certainly raises its head in the clinical world. And of course, it takes a long time and a lot of psychotherapeutic work for people to come to the realization that it's not them that's wrong, it's not them that has the vehicle of shame, it's actually come from the shaming actions of someone else.
Yeah.
Abused people invariably will decide there's something wrong with me.
Yes. Yeah.
And of course, we all know it isn't anything wrong with them. It comes from the abuser. And it should be the abuser that should be shamed.
But like you say, often it's not. 99.9% of the time it's not. It's the abused that feels the shame.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. However, in the healing process, that's part of the healing process that the client, in the context of what we're talking about, is able to understand the difference. That's part of the healing.
Yeah.
And another part of the healing, working with shame, is to get to a place, takes quite a while down the line, where they can give the shame that they feel back to the people who shamed them.
Say that again, Bob.
Yeah, part of the healing down the line, once they've realized that it's not their shame and they're not the people's
Right. Yeah.
wrong, in inverted commas,
Yeah.
down the line from there, part of the healing experience is then giving that shame back to
Right.
the very people who shamed them.
Yes. Yeah.
Very important.
Yeah.
And the
Because
vehicle for doing that is often two-chair work.
yeah. Yeah. I didn't do two-chair work when I'm not practicing anymore now, but when I was, I didn't do two-chair work, and I wished I'd have looked more into it.
Very powerful technique.
Yeah.
But if you're not going to use two-chair work, another powerful medium where the client can give back the shame is through visualizations. So they give the shame back through visualization.
Yeah. Yeah, because often blame and shame are used together. Do you know what I mean? I want to say quite flippantly. Do you know what I mean? When you blame and shame someone, the two come together. So
That's right. So so visualization. Let me give you an example of a visualization. I'll give you many, 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 but I'll do one. So you can ask the client, how do you imagine your shame? And the client says, when I think of my shame, I think of green muck or green gobulets intrinsically in my very body, which is biting at me. So we did a visualization where she gathered all the greenness. This is intrinsically stuck inside her, which is corresponding to the shame. And she put it in a special casket, which has got magical powers. And she carried the casket very slowly, but very carefully, up a long, winding road through a forest. And the forest had the wonderful trees, which were very magical to look at. And as she wandered through her journey through the forest and through this long, winding road, she eventually came to a clearing. And in the middle of this clearing was a well. And in this well, as she looked down in the well, she couldn't see the bottom of the well. But she realized that the well was probably took, if she dropped this shame, for example, all the way back to an outlet where the outlet would go back to the very people who shamed her. And very carefully, she got its casket, a magic casket with the shame that was in, and she got each goblet of shame and dropped it into the well with some statement like, "This is going back to the place where it came." Or next piece of goblet, "There's nothing wrong with me. I'm an okay person, and I'm going to give you the shame back." Bit by bit, they drop each goblet of shame into the well, knowing that we swept back to the very people that shamed them in the first place.
What a lovely visualization, Bob. I was there with you on that journey.
Yeah. And then you finish it up by saying, okay, now you've done that, just be aware of what and how your body feels. And I suspect it feels lighter. And maybe you can fill it with golden rays of sunshine, so you feel warm on your way back through the forest to that winding road to where we began. That's what I mean by visualization.
That's
You
amazing.
don't have to use a two-chair technique. You can find some ways like this. It doesn't have to be that story.
Yes, yeah, but it's a very good one. And I think it's important about the bit where you're saying, you know, the outlet sending it back to where it came from as well. Because if you're going to do it, you want to do it right.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It doesn't have to be a well. It could
Yeah.
be you go to a locked room, and in that locked room is the person who shamed you.
Yeah.
You're locked in that room where you've got the only key. You know, you could do many visualizations.
Yeah.
It's a powerful way to give back the shame, well, however they see the shame, whether it's a black blob or whatever it is, they have the power now to reverse the process.
There's something about visualization as well that stays with the person.
Yeah.
That if, you know, they get those feelings of shame again, that they can visualize that themselves, because it's kind of like an experiential thing.
Yes, very much so.
So it stays with them rather than, I don't know, them reading about it or you just talking at them. The fact that they're experiencing that whole walking through the forest or going to the well or whatever it is, it stays with them. Yeah.
You could also, if you're not going to use touch chair, you could do artwork where you draw the abuser or the person who shamed them, and you draw yourself and you make yourself very big picture.
Yeah.
So there's many ways that you could do this. I like two chair to work because we can bring in the shamed person and we can put them in a one-way box, for example, and the client's got the key and they can't get it. So I like that. And there's many ways of doing two-chair work around giving back shame. It means making the person who shamed them very small.
So how
So the
would
bar
we?
becomes bigger.
Yeah, well, it gives them more power then, doesn't it? Yeah. How would we see shame in the therapy room? What would
Oh,
we be
okay. So
observing?
yeah, it's good because we went back to the experiential exercises around treatment, working with people who have a shame-based presentation. But if we wind back to how they come in the first place, well, usually they have low self-esteem. By that, if you ask about their internal narrative or decisions about themselves, they'll probably say things like, well, I tell myself I'm worthless, or I tell myself I have no value, or I feel very small. And often when they're talking, their eyes will be downcast, their voice will go lower, and they will seem like they are quite small than they actually are.
Yeah,
What's happened in reality is that if you're thinking developmentally, they're probably going back to that age where they first felt shame. So that example you just talked to me about, I think you said 7. Was
yeah.
it?
Well, the primary school
Yeah.
age. Yeah, yeah,
But we're talking about primary school, and we're talking about the way I just started to talk. You might well go back developmentally to that age. And that's what I mean by appearing young or small.
yeah. Absolutely.
But if you go farther and you say, what are you saying to yourself? What are the decisions you made about yourself when you felt rejected or humiliated or shamed in that way? Then you'll find out, oh, I decided that there was something wrong with me then, or that I'm worthless or don't have any value, or I should be seen and not heard.
That one, Bob. That's the one.
All those sort of decisions
Yeah,
somebody from a shame-based presentation may make, and what you might observe is that they look a lot younger. Their
yeah,
voice goes down, their eyes go down. And a consequence of this is low self-esteem. Yeah. And from
yeah,
a position of low self-esteem, lots of things happen. Usually they project onto the other person that the other person's okay and they're not okay.
yeah,
Or they act out in ways which aren't in the world of empowerment, more in the world of subjugation and, I'm not okay world.
yeah.
So self-esteem comes with low self-esteem comes and with somebody from a shame-based system.
Because I think shame is something we need to be mindful of in the therapy room, because in my mind, it's a really big block in therapy. Do you know what I mean? The like avoiding being vulnerable or avoiding certain subjects that make you feel uncomfortable or whatever. It's
Yeah.
it's a really big thing for an awful lot of people in the
Yeah.
therapy room.
And of course, we have a double paradox, and that is, you asked earlier. Well, let's go back to my article. It's called The Forgotten Emotion for a reason, like you said at the beginning. It's not often talked about in the psychotherapy room. And here we go. Clients don't often talk about feeling ashamed because they're ashamed to even talk about feeling ashamed.
Yeah,
So their narrative is self-defeating. They feel diminished and they feel very small. And developmentally, it's like you're talking to the younger person at the point of the shaming experience.
yeah. So
Does
what
that
can we
make
do?
sense?
Say again.
Is that clear what I've said?
Yes, yeah, yeah,
And the healing really is to help them understand. Well, first of all, the healing, number one, is to listen to their story.
yes,
Number two is to bring the concept of shame into the room. Number three, if need be, and it might fit into the clinical treatment, you do some educative therapy about shame, what it looks like, and the negative consequences that are played out for somebody from a shame-based process. You don't have to do the negative therapy, but often quite useful. Number 4, listen to their story very accurately again, do the script analysis, and help them understand that it's not their shame in the first place. It comes from somewhere else.
Yeah.
Number 6, get them to, or help them in the journey of who is the person to shame them. It might be collective people, it could be a single person, it could be the mother, father, teacher, whoever. Yeah, and then once you've done them and you help them understand it's not their shame, it's the other person's shame, you move on eventually to help them empower themselves and grow up again by giving back the shame to the people that shamed them. After that, you help them integrate that into their persona and put new qualities, positive qualities, integrate that into their personality structure because they've got rid of the negative stuff.
Yeah. Because we need to fill that space with something else, really, don't we? I think that's something that we often, well, not, maybe that's an assumption, that we don't always pay attention to when we take something away from the person, that we don't, replace it with something more positive, a new decision, whatever. Yeah.
New decisions, a new narrative.
Yeah.
Help them increase their self-esteem. Help them empower themselves.
So, Bob, you were talking at the beginning of this podcast about an article that you did all about shame 15 years ago. Where can people access that?
Several places. One on my own website, bobcooke.org.
Yeah.
I'll go to the Institute website, mcpt.co.uk, and go into the tab at the top, which says Transactional Analyst Magazines, and it's in one of those magazines.
Absolutely brilliant. I will be going and doing that myself after this because it is a topic that I don't know enough about, really. Yeah. Okie doke. So until next time, Bob, where we'll be talking about working with multiples, a model for effective treatment.
Oh, that would be fantastic. And what I specialised in all those years ago.
Absolutely no idea what this is one's going to bring up, Bob, but I'm looking forward to it.
Look forward to seeing you then.
Take care.
You've been listening to The Therapy Show, Behind Closed Doors podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. We'll be back next week with another episode.